Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This probably looks very similar to a video that you watched just before this. If you haven't watched the video titled 2 Habitat Improvements, the term and the lingo, if you will, that talks about TSI and FSI, I recommend that you look at that first because it ties directly into this. We're talking about terms and definitions to help folks clarify what they are and why we use them, and even more important, where we use them, right? So the second step here, the third step here, guys, that we're going to talk about after you understand the FSI and the TSI and why them are different and where we put them. The third topic here, guys, is something that a lot of folks don't use that could, because I think the prescribed fire, guys, when we're talking about this step, the fire part of that really worries folks, and rightly so. I do not recommend doing this third step, guys, without having the knowledge, the fire knowledge, the right equipment in the right area. It can be very detrimental. I've seen it get out of control. It's a very, very great tool, again, that was created in large areas. A large prescribed fire area, guys, can be easier maintained than a small area. It doesn't. A lot of folks don't think that, but it's very true. Where the scare factor, if you will, comes in is when folks hear the word fire, we initially connect that to the term wildfire, right? A wildfire is something that gets out of control, that maybe it was started by lightning, maybe it was started by the government agencies, hopefully not intentionally, which has happened in the past, but they start these fires, or these fires they run rampant and they're out of control because there's no fire breaks, there's no dozed in lines creating fire breaks, there's no road systems to shut them down, and they run rampant and destroy properties, homes, and hopefully don't kill anybody in the meantime. That's a wildfire. A prescribed fire here, guys, is just the opposite. It's a specific area that we're burning for a specific reason. So let's talk about that, guys. I think what you'll find is this. You'll find a lot of other people are recommending that you burn 10 acres, right? You burn 20 acres. It's a huge application and a huge thing that folks do in the South, because the southern part of the country is managing for yellow pine and or longleaf pine or something like that, that's producing a lot of our timber, our structure timber. In other words, like our products, our 2x4, stuff like that. A lot of it comes from the South, right? So what they're doing, guys, is they're using fire to maintain and focus on TSI to better that timber, right? Their timber is pine. You can use that fire in TSI as well, and hardwood, but where it generated from is for the health and to take the vegetation away so the nutrients weren't getting absorbed somewhere else, and it's going to the tree, producing timber and lumber faster, right? So it's a great application. But when you're putting it into an area that you have to micromanage, if you will, you don't want to just light 10 acres that they would in TSI. Here we go again. Can it be used? Absolutely. Should it be used? It would be great. There's some states that won't allow it. Michigan's not big on it. You have to have certain certifications. Kentucky, you can't burn in the state of Kentucky if you're a private landowner now, unless you have a permit to do so, or the way it reads is you can't do it during daylight hours. You have to do it at dark. Well, most folks don't want to do it at dark, so they either hire somebody to do it, which I would recommend if you're not used to that. So wind is one thing to keep in mind, right? How do you burn? How you burn, guys, is you always want you want to put a fire into the wind, right? So you don't want to actually light this on fire on this side, guys, right here with this wind, because it's going to push this and it's going to eat all this fuel all of this leaves and you know, debris that's choking off the vegetation, the growth from the FSI, you're looking to burn all that, right? But if you put the wind at the back and there's no fire break, it runs rapid in here, and this is where that wildfire comes in, because you can't stop it. There's nothing here to stop. So what we want to do, guys, is we want to actually burn this on this wind, right? On that same wind, but we're actually starting, if we want to burn this whole area, we're actually starting the fire back here. And you're letting this fire crawl this way the entire time, and it's eating the fuel. It's eating all of this fuel in here, and it's working its way towards the stopping point, right? Your fire break. That's how you burn. Now, hopefully you have to watch so this wind isn't too strong that you get embers over here, flying over here, and creating these sparks and these jump fires that we call it, and creating what we refer to as wild, right? It's a you have to err on the side of caution. I think a lot of folks burn that don't have to burn. I also think that it's a buzzword, and a lot of folks, just because it works on one property or one region, maybe you don't have to do it in the other region for some browse and some taller vegetation. The further north you are, the taller your vegetation, the less you have to burn. The further south you are, the longer your growing seasons are. In order to maintain those areas, to keep them short, burning is a great tool. So that's kind of the difference to keep it from a wildfire and keep it in the prescription, right? The prescribed fire. So what we want to look at, guys, is this. If we go back to our 40-acre square, because it's easy to teach off from, right, that we talked about in the last video as far as our TSI and FSI. Instead of taking, like I was saying, guys, a lot of the prescription would say to you, burn 10 acres, maybe burn 20 acres of your 40, right? Well, that could be true, 20 acres, but I would never burn 20 acres, definitely not at one time, but I wouldn't burn 20 acres total at one whole area. And I'm going to show you the reason why, guys, is you want to have diversity. And if you burn 20 acres total, your entire core, let's just say this, you know, that promoted line of travel that we talk about, right? This core right here, you don't want to burn this entire area, let's say, because yes, it will be different. So FSI and TSI, right? This is the break, FSI to the core. This is different from the outside. Yes, it creates an edge, but that whole 20 acres is all the same. You don't have, are you headed in the right direction? Are you thinking right? Yes, you are. But you have to create that same 20-acre effect, maybe in 20 different locations, 10 different locations, 30 different locations, depending on the size of your property, right? And why I say this, guys, instead of burning this whole area, these pockets that we talked about, when we talked about having your FSI in your core, and then taking these areas down even further. So FSI in here, so less canopy to the core, big timber to the outside, TSI to the outside, has something to do with your access. Big timber out here, less timber in here, 20-inch stuff out here, down to 14 or 16 inches in here. Then these areas that we're speaking of right here are cut down even further, right? This is how we steer deer. These areas are between your stand location. So you have a licking branch here, stand location like we're talking, right? Stands here. Licking branches are X's. The stands are the dots, right? So that's how you steer the deer, guys. You have these areas here that are actually lower than your FSI. So big timber, more open canopy, maybe even 50% more in here is open, 50% more daylight than there is out here. Promotes better growth. So you have this vegetation, the explosion of vegetation, and you don't have to worry about going back in that your FSI area for maybe 20 years, right? So you can build all this stuff, you can hunt it the same way for 20 years. But instead of burning this whole area, now we know these pockets in here have to be cut down even further. So these pockets should stand out. If you go into an area, guys, and you take a drone, you should be able to see this area to the outside should be big, beautiful timber, big canopy, closed canopy. You should see this break. You should be able to look down and say, okay, that's probably where my transition is, because that's an edge. It's even cut down. And then these areas, these pockets, maybe a half acre. Maybe they pertain to food plots. Maybe it's the same size as your food plot because it's doe bedding. Maybe it's a habitat pocket. Those areas are even shorter than the FSI. That's where your fire, guys, comes in. So if you were to burn these pockets right here, what we would do, right? Maybe let's just say these are an acre apiece, half acre apiece. Let's just call them half acre apiece. So these areas right here, guys, if we take these out and we just blow it up over here, this is your promoted line of travel, right? So what I would do is the year that you mulch this back out, your promoted line of travel, you have a mulcher come in and you mulch it out so it becomes a fire break, right? It's got some dirt, something exposed, something where that fire is going to stop. We're actually going to burn these on a south wind. We're going to burn this on a south wind. This habitat pocket in here that we speak of, right, that we know it's on the right side of the line of travel, these pockets right here, we're going to burn these. We're going to go back here with a leaf blower and we're going to blow the back side of these areas off so we get some dirt exposed. We're going to drip torch these areas right here and burn this so the fuel, the fire is burning strong in here and it's pushing against and it's eating its way, all this fuel, it's burning its way all the way towards this fire break. It gets all the way through here, because if you light it here and it pushes, it's going to go right on past here. You get back here, you're going to burn this towards the transition, towards your mulched area so you can stop it. It's going to burn this entire area an acre. Now what you've got, guys, is this whole area inside of this is your FSI, right? This area here stands out. These two areas stand out different than your core. Great deer food in here, even better deer food here. This is where you get all of these new forbs and forages and you keep it. We're not planting anything in these initially unless you're in a low deer density area. It's a separate video.
Everything working as planned. Rocking down through this bottom, through the pine needles, right up to the edge of the fire break. Gets a little jiggy with the vines growing up in the pine trees, but leaf blower knocks it right out.
But these areas are the forbs and forages, your greenbrier, your woody browse, all of your blackberry, all that stuff that's different is in here. That is how you compartmentalize these deer 360 degrees around your farm. It's not burn solid 20s or solid 10-acre chunks. It's the right thought process, but if you want to take it to the next level and you want to go to the next level as far as maintaining so you don't have to light 20 acres on fire, the common, Joe, if you will, the common you and I that are watching this and talking about this can burn a quarter or a half acre and keep it under control. You start getting into these 10 and 20 acre burns, you better know what you're doing, and you better have a dozer on site and have these areas super bulletproof that you're not going to destroy your farm and the next farm and the next farm. A lot of folks will do in here, guys, if you're not 100% comfortable with the whole burning and which way should you go. Now we're talking flat ground. Now you add thermals into it, there's a lot to it, right? I'd highly recommend, if you're not 110% confident, hire someone to do this for you. What a lot of folks, my clients, are doing is they take the leaf blower, guys, a couple of guys with some big, I've got the BR600 backpack leaf blowers, go in and go around this entire thing and blow these leaves, let's say, into these 2 and 3 foot, 4 foot piles, let's say, something like that, and blow the leaves off the area and burn them. That's a safer way to do it, The problem with that is you don't set the browse back, and you don't, and sometimes it's hard because it's so thick to blow, leaf blow in those areas, and you're not putting the ash in these areas, guys, is so it can be so nutritional, right? And you're killing some of that old vegetation setting it back, and you can't do that by leaf blowing it. Is it safer? Like I said, yes. So keep in mind, that's why we are doing these areas, guys. Your areas, your habitat pockets, like I said, some of these may pertain to doe bedding, some of these may be habitat pockets, some of these may be internal right here, as long as they attach back out to your stand locations. Don't just go in here and willy-nilly put these all over the property thinking that you're doing yourself a favor. They have to connect back out to these point of impacts. Kind of a separate video, but make sure that you're only burning, maybe you're reaching 20 acres out of 40. But you're going to be doing that in 10 or 20 different areas, maybe 30 different areas, right? Easier, safer, makes more sense, and you can steer deer in those areas. And then it becomes part of your management structure. Do you have to burn these every year? Maybe, if you're in the South. Do you burn them every year in Michigan? No. There's very few areas that I would, like northern Indiana, Michigan, New York, Wisconsin, something like that, Minnesota, that I would ever recommend burning every year. The deal is this, guys, is when you burn, you're trying to keep this vegetation, forest floor, right? You're trying to keep this vegetation short and palatable in here. What happens is, guys, this sounds all cool in the South when you have no snow. But if you do this every year and your vegetation is this, same height, or maybe even shorter because your growing season's shorter, and this is the forest floor, and you burn this, and then you add 2 foot of snow on top of this, and this is all covered up, it's doing you no good, not a lot of good, because it's all covered up. That's where hinge cuts come in. That's where we're getting our vegetation above the ground a little bit. So like I said, some folks will tell you no hinge cuts, probably because they're from the South, or they don't have to worry about a snow load. They're not looking for structure, something like that. But that's why you don't have to burn there every year, because if you let your vegetation, even if you don't do hinge cuts and you're just doing burn, if you let this vegetation grow up 3 foot tall, let's say, so it's browse, so when it snows a foot or 2 foot, you still have good food worthy browse and vegetation. That's the goal, right? But as soon as that gets 4 or 5 feet tall, it's time to burn it, set it back down, and redo that. So Michigan, Wisconsin, New York, Minnesota, maybe every third year burn. Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, here in Kentucky, maybe that's every year, right? So again, guys, prescribed fire in the right areas, it's another part of the habitat term. But there again, I think if you flip on the channel, or you flip on a outdoor channel, let's say, it's very easy to get caught in just saying, yes, they said prescribed fire and burn 20 acres. If they're burning 20 acres all at a hole, that's the right thought process, but go a step further, guys. Make it easier for yourself to do, and understand it's a very, very, very great tool to have in your tool bag, in your arsenal, if you do it in the right areas, such as TSI and FSI. Just because it's a term doesn't mean we need to throw it over the entire property, and over the entire whitetail range, and not understand what it is and where we need to put it and how we need to go about creating it. Thanks, guys.